Look, I think we're looking at a number of different developments today, all of which, frankly, are quite up in the air. First of all, Islamic Jihad, that's a militant group in Gaza allied to Hamas. It's released a video of 2 Israeli hostages, an elderly woman, a young teenage boy, saying it's prepared to release them if security conditions are met. It's not clear what those conditions are. Certainly the release has not happened yet. There have been multiple reports swirling around about this deal being brokered by Qatar, about a dozen potential hostages being released in exchange for a humanitarian pause in the fighting of around 3 days. But still no indication really from Israeli officials that they're willing to accept that. We have had the US saying there's going to be a 4-hour daily pause in the north of Gaza, but you know, the Israeli army is downplaying that, saying that's pretty much a continuation of what we ourselves saw yesterday with what they call this humanitarian corridor, allowing people to flee from the north to the south. And in fact, if anything, what they're talking up is actually the fighting. Yeah, absolutely. The fighting really seems to be intensifying, particularly around Gaza City. We can play a video now, I think. Okay, let's listen. Pretty intense stuff. Yeah, I mean, those are huge explosions, presumably caused by Israeli airstrikes next to, very close to, a major hospital in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. And Israel has been claiming repeatedly that Hamas key military infrastructure is hidden around hospitals just like that. Of course, doctors there, Hamas, they deny that. Sure. We do know that large numbers of civilians are there being treated and displaced and seeking shelter there. We also know that the Israeli army is vowing to press further into Gaza City. It's said that in recent days it's been fighting around less than a mile away from the al-Shifa hospital, that very big hospital many people will be familiar with now from the tragic scenes we've been seeing out of Gaza. They say they've been destroying tunnels and killing Hamas militants there. Certainly what we're not seeing from anyone in Israel is talk of a ceasefire. Okay, so Kanda, stay there. More from you later in the programme. Well, let's go over to Washington now, and our correspondent Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan, what can you tell us?
Well, Matt, the White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby has been asked non-stop when these humanitarian pauses would begin. He's had to bat off those questions rather awkwardly on a daily basis. Well, today, as you've said, he has had some good news, ostensibly, when he told reporters that Israel, it appears, has formally agreed to announce these daily 4-hour pauses in its siege of Gaza to begin today, apparently, perhaps to coincide with the release of some hostages, and thereafter Israel, Kirby said, will announce the pause 3 hours before it is due to begin. Well, the White House will certainly bill this as a win for its intense behind-the-scenes diplomacy, but Joe Biden almost immediately poured cold water on it when he said that he'd been asking for a pause for much longer than that. Listen to what he told a reporter when he was asked whether or not it was true that he'd asked Prime Minister Netanyahu for a pause of more than 3 days earlier on this week. Hear what Joe Biden had to say.
Did you ask him to pause for 3 days to get the hostages out for that length of time?
I've asked for even a longer pause for some of them.
Mr. President, are you frustrated with Prime Minister Netanyahu that he has not listened more to some of the things you have asked him to do?
It's taking a little longer than I hoped.
It's taking a little bit longer.
Well, you heard Joe Biden there openly admitting, I think for the first time, that he is beginning to get frustrated with how long these pauses are taking to implement, especially given the pressure he is under here, both from the Muslim community and from members of his own Democratic Party who are calling not for a pause, but for a ceasefire. On the notion of a ceasefire, Joe Biden was asked today whether there was a possibility that there could be one. None, the president said. No possibility. Matt.
Pretty clear. Siobhan Kennedy, thank you very much. Well, let's go to the Israeli government spokesman, Ayman Levy. He joins me now from Tel Aviv. Ayman Levy, it's good to have you back on the program. Can you just clear up this confusion then? Because the White House apparently wants 3 days. You're prepared to formalize these 4-hour breaks. Which one is it?
There will be no ceasefire without a return of our hostages. We have Hamas holding 239 of our people, including a 10-month-old baby hostage, and we do not plan to rest until we do everything in our power to bring them home. But at the same time, we're making superhuman efforts in order to keep residents of northern Gaza safe from Hamas's own reckless endangerment of them by embedding itself deep under populated areas. That's why I saw your excellent report yesterday. The IDF is, in fact, securing a humanitarian corridor every day for people to leave, in fact, keeping those people safe from Hamas that has been attacking that corridor.
Okay. Right, but a lot of it is in the language, isn't it? Now, President Biden himself has said no chance of a ceasefire, but he does want that 3-day pause in the fighting. Is your government prepared to grant him that?
No temporary ceasefire is on the table until we have a return of our hostages. That is the crisis that we are most concerned about, the fate of 239 people, babies to...
If you get those 2 hostages back that, you know, the Islamic Jihad we're talking about tonight, would that trigger the 3-day pause in the fighting?
I'm not going to speculate about details of sensitive discussions that may or may not have been taking place, but we are demanding the immediate and unconditional return of all of our hostages, and we expect our allies to put all possible pressure on Hamas to that end.
Right. I mean, America is your best friend. They've been by your side. They've given you a lot of moral, military and financial support, and yet it seems they really don't hold much sway over your government.
Israel and the United States are in complete lockstep on the goals of this war, which is that the war must end with the complete destruction of Hamas. Now, we're very sensitive...
But President Biden was irritated with you today. I mean, President Biden did, very rarely for him, express irritation with your government. You heard the clip.
Well, let me tell you about the efforts that Israel is making in order to protect civilians in the northern Gaza Strip as we continue with our campaign to defeat Hamas. Today, Israel opened, I believe it's the first army in history to do so, a human shield hotline. We know that Hamas is holding people against their will in northern Gaza and stopping them from leaving because their entire strategy is based on holding human shields. And I want to read out that number to you right now.
Can I just ask, I just want to ask you about that. Sorry to interrupt you. This is such a novel idea. A human shield hotline. How is that supposed to work when you shut down the internet and the telecoms?
There are phone lines in Gaza at the moment, and I want to read the number because I know many people in the UK may be concerned for friends or relatives in Gaza, and if they call our line, tell them that Hamas is holding them hostage, +972 50 341 0322. I'll say it again in case your technicians want to put it on the ticker on the screen, +972 50 341 0322. That's the Human Shield hotline. Alternatively, if they want to contact us by Telegram, they can at Gaza_saver, and we will do whatever we can in order to rescue from the clutches of Hamas.
Right, so you've bombed them relentlessly for the last month. You've killed over 10,000, mainly civilians, and now you're giving them the Human Shield hotline.
No, Matt. 27 days ago, Israel warned residents of northern Gaza to get out of harm's way because the fighting is going to get dangerous where Hamas has cynically embedded itself under civilian infrastructure. We're pleased that most of the residents of northern Gaza have heeded our warning and have got out of the way, and only a small minority remain. And we're calling on them to get out of the way because Hamas is putting them in danger by building tunnels under their homes, schools, hospitals, mosques.
Okay, going to leave it there. Elon Levy, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you,
now, the brutal 7th of October attacks by Hamas here in Israel and the subsequent onslaught on Gaza by Israeli forces have shattered families on both sides, as we've seen ourselves. The scale of the death and the suffering is so high, it is often, frankly, quite difficult to comprehend. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Sikandar Kamani, brings us the stories of 2 families from either side whose lives in the past month have been torn apart. And be warned, there are distressing images in this report.
A frantic search for survivors. The dust, the debris, the panic that follow Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, now devastatingly familiar. This used to be the home of the Abu Shamala family in Khan Yunis before the 26th of October. The sheer number of people killed in Gaza can be hard to fathom. Here's a glimpse into the pain caused by this one strike. 4 of Marwan's children were amongst the victims. There was 20-year-old student Aya, 10-year-old Shad, brothers Mahmoud and Mohammed. His wife, brother, nephews killed too. In total, more than 20 people.
The youngest, Shahid, was not even 10 years old. She had hopes for a bright future, to learn and study, and to live in a just society. But Israeli injustice and bombing deprived her of that.
Israel says only Hamas fighters are targeted, but nowhere in Gaza seems safe. Much of the extended family had fled here after being told to evacuate homes elsewhere.
I remember every day when I used to return from work, Shahid would come and hug me. I remember so many beautiful moments, my wife embracing my children and preparing food for them. Now my son Ibrahim asks me, what's left for us?
On the other side of this conflict, in Israel, there are families torn apart too. Or and his wife Inev had been together since they were teenagers. They drove down to the Supernova Music Festival the morning of the October the 7th attack, leaving their 2-year-old son with his grandparents. As they arrived, the assault began. This video captures them hiding in a bomb shelter. The mood initially seems relatively calm. But Hamas fighters find the shelter and throw grenades inside, shooting anyone trying to escape. Many, including Ayman, were killed, but there was no sign of Or's body. So you really had to scroll, like,
I watched those videos frame by frame, like almost obsessively.
His brother Michael scoured the internet for signs he was still alive. Then came a call from the government telling the family Or had been taken to Gaza. How's his son doing?
It's not easy. It's not easy. He's only 2, but he is calling for his mother and his father all the time. We love him and hug him all the time, but it's not the same. It's not like his mom and dad.
Does he know his mother's dead?
Not yet. I mean, how can you tell a 2-year-old boy that he wants his mother?
You're just hoping that his father comes back one day.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing everything in my power to get his father back, so he could at least have one parent.
Back in Khan Yunis, Abdullah and his father, also members of the extended Abu Shamala family, wander through the destruction in the neighborhood. Who wouldn't be terrified living here?
We try to calm ourselves down with words like, I'm still young and I have future, and I still have a future to do, and I don't want to die. I repeat these words constantly to calm myself down. I'm basically lying to myself. Everywhere is targeted. There is no safety in any place.
The war has taken the lives of thousands of children here, and it's destroying the childhoods of many more.
My life, like any child in the world, should be safe. I have the right to play, the right to live safely, the right to live my childhood like any other child. We're all equal. At the end of the day, we're all humans.
And Sekander's still with me here. Sekander, there are so many unforgettable images from this war, and one of them was something that you had in your piece yesterday from Gaza. Hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians walking from Gaza City to the supposed safety of the south, some of them carrying the white flags of surrender. They are very worried that they're also surrendering their houses and their homes for good, aren't they?
Absolutely, and that speaks to a really deep-seated collective trauma of the Palestinian people, who many of whom, particularly in Gaza, had been pushed out during the creation of Israel in 1948. So America says that they must be allowed to return. Israel says that they will be allowed to return when the conditions are right. But many people there just simply don't trust that. They feel that maybe there's a plan to push them into Egypt, into the Sinai Desert. I think there's a desire in many circles in Israel and elsewhere in the world for the Palestinian Authority to take over responsibility eventually in Gaza. They lack a lot of credibility. They've said that they could be willing to countenance that if it's part of a proper two-state solution. That's eluded people for decades, and you've got more than 500,000 settlers in the occupied West Bank. What happens to them? I wanted to ask you, Matt, because I know you've been here for reporting on this conflict for much longer than I have. How have you seen the dynamics play out? Where do you see it going now?
Well, when I lived here in 1989, just over there, in fact, I remember meeting an elderly Palestinian man in the neighborhood, and he showed me the key to the house that he had to leave in 1948, and holding on to that key was his hope of returning. And I said to him, that will never happen. That is now an Israeli neighborhood. And he said to me, you know what, you think this is bad now? It's going to get so much worse. And that's been true every single time, including in the last month. But it's so bad now, one has to hope that eventually there is some degree of compromise and a meeting of minds, because the alternative is even worse.